Hello and welcome back. I hope you are well. I am Dana and today I am testing out and giving some first impressions on this set of Inktense pencils by Derwent. I got this set of 12 as a present over the holidays from my family, and today I'm going to be trying them out on Hahnemuhle Nostalgie paper, which I was using last week, and giving a little first impressions for you guys. So first of all, these are the 12 pencils that came in the set. It's quite an interesting colour selection, at least in my opinion, which I'll go over in a moment. They arrived half sharpened, so the ends were blunt, which I tend to notice can be a common thing when it comes to colour pencils since they are a little bit more brittle. And I'm going to be doing some dry and wet swatching with these because Inktense pencils are water soluble, like watercolour pencils, but they're advertised as being more like ink, in that when they are activated with water and then left to dry, they can't be reactivated again, so they're supposed to be really, really good for layering multiple wet layers. Watercolour pencils, you might have noticed before if you've ever used them, if you have a wet layer that you leave to dry and then put another wet layer on top, it can and does tend to reactivate the lower layer, and it's not supposed to happen with these. So as you can see with the colour selection, it starts off quite standard. There's a yellow, so we've got a sun yellow, and then we have tangerines, we have an orange, and then we have a warm red with poppy red, and then we have a cool red with fuchsia, and then once we move past that, we get some interesting choices. We get some interesting blues, and then we get 3 greens, which I've not seen before in a 12 set. There's also something you might have noticed. There is no white in this set. That's not something that bothers me, but it's something to keep in mind if you're interested in this set and you're wanting a white. There is a black, and there's 2 browns, but there's 3 greens that we'll be getting into. So the first blue is a deep indigo, which I just did, and that's really, really lovely. It's absolutely gorgeous. And then the next one is sea blue, which is more of a mid blue. It's not quite as warm as an ultramarine, and it's not as cool as a phthalo green shade. It's a little difficult to determine exactly what it's like without putting it next to, say, like a cobalt blue. And then we have a teal green, which is the first of our 3 greens. And then apple green. And I'm doing a long swatch, which I then activate with water underneath, but leave some of the top without being activated by water so that you can kind of see what it looks like with the grain of the paper at the end, because I'll be doing some close-ups. And then we have leaf green, which is a much more muted earthy green. I do love how these just melt underwater. That was one of the things that I noticed straight away. Faber-Castell watercolor pencils, the Albrecht Dürer line, they also melt under water really, really well, but these just, you can't even see any of the paper, any of the pencil grain on the paper after you've applied water to it. It just all melts into pigment in the water. And so we have the 2 browns here. We have more of like a burnt sienna, which is the baked earth, and then we have an umber, which is the bark, and then finally we have ink black. I think the deep indigo, the bark, and the ink black would all be good as single pencils to use as monotone studies. I think you'd get a really nice range of lights to darks by using them. I'm going to be using these to do an illustration soon. I'm planning it probably to do on Nostalgie paper, the same paper I'm swatching with here, but we'll see. I've been testing out the markers that I showed in last week's video in my sketchbook to do some animal studies and things like that, and I'm planning on doing some illustrations with those soon as well, so keep an eye out for that. Here I am just doing a little square just to show you how easily the pigment just melts with water. And then the next swatch, I blend two different colours together. I do the fuchsia, and I believe I do either sea blue or teal green. I think it's the teal green. And they layer really, really well dry and mix together when activated with water to produce lovely mixes. So I start by applying the fuchsia, and they feel really, really nice on this paper. This is a smooth paper with a tiny, tiny bit of tooth to it, and you can see that tooth with the grain of the paper in this swatch. And you can kind of see a little bit about how they layer in this, because I do 2 layers of the fuchsia and 1 layer of the teal green. Combining a cool red, so like a pinky red, magenta, with a teal green turquoise can produce some really, really lovely muted purples and also muted blues sometimes as well. And it's something that I love doing in watercolour, and I believe I also layered those two together with the markers last week to produce a muted purple, I think was the effect last week. And this is no different when they get activated with water. That's one beautiful thing about learning colour theory in one medium, because it usually crosses over with the other mediums. Digital can be a little bit spookier with that, but it usually rings true with traditional mediums. And now I'm taking pigment directly off the pencil tip and applying it to the paper, so a little bit more like using pans of watercolour, which works really, really well actually. And I tried to charge in more pigment as well into the wet area just to see how it blends. And I was kind of just playing around a little bit at this point. I didn't really do comprehensive studies or analysis or anything like that. I was just kind of going with the flow, seeing what I wanted to test out on this side of the paper. And here I decided to do a gradient with a few different colours. I went from, I believe, orange to deep indigo. And then once I layered this gradient, which is quite a light layer, I apply water down one side to see how well a long gradient would blend together. And I was impressed, that's all I'll say, which you'll see soon. So that's what a light layer of the different colours looks like on the paper. And now I am gonna activate down one side with water. I just used a water brush for all of this, just simple and easy. And as you can see, each colour just blends beautifully one into the next, which is quite nice considering it's a water brush as well. You can't always get the best water control with a water brush compared to your just standard brush in a cup of water. And then for the final test, I just did a really big swatch of one colour, and then I let it dry, and I just applied some other layers on top. And I lost the footage of applying the final layers on top, but you will see them. You'll see the end result. It was actually surprisingly easy to do a larger area. I'm not sure how well and how smooth a really, really large area of colour laydown would be like if I were to do a sky. but that's something that I can test out with an actual illustration rather than just these little tests. Because sometimes you don't know what things are going to be like until you actually use them for a finished piece or for actual sketches or anything like that. But swatching is definitely fun. It definitely feels like playing around. It's very relaxing. And then finally I just decided to test out some ink on top of the, I don't even know if you can call them watercolour. It's not really watercolour, but it feels weird calling them ink as well. On top of the dried activated pigment, I put some ink on top just to see if it looked good, and it does look good. And here are some close-ups so that you can see what they look like both wet and dry. You can still see some of the pigment to like where the two dry and wet areas meet, but if I were to just like cover the whole section with water, it would just blend away more than likely, like it did with the swatch at the top here. And overall, I'm really excited to try these out. If you've ever tried these, let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye!